So that was glucose. We also get energy from lipids and proteins. As soon as the system floods with too much carbohydrates, we convert it into fat. Receptors, there are different receptors that are on the surface that are not present there when enough glucose gets inside a cell, and that converts, it tells the body, so start converting it into glycogen. Once I've converted into glycogen, if there's still carbohydrates, still glucose in my system, blood, I gotta get rid of it. It's not supposed to be there, right? So we convert it into fat, okay? And that does that through a handful of various different processes. Lipids are the same. When you eat food, you consume too much triglyceride, because that's the fat that we're talking about here. And we bring those triglycerides, we bring the fatty acid chains into the cell to provide energy. Number one, carbohydrate. Number two, fatty acids, fats. Fats, where glucose can provide, what, 32 ATP? Lipids can provide around 100 and, well, depending upon the length of the fatty acid chain, can provide upwards of 100 plus units of energy in one fatty acid chain. Your fatty acids that you consume have 3 fatty acid chains for every triglyceride. So you're getting upwards of 300 plus ATPs for every triglyceride that you shovel in your mouth. Obviously, I am creating a situation to where, oh my gosh, I've produced a huge amount of ATP. I can't store ATP. There's no way to store ATP. Okay, you make enough ATP to fund what you do. So tracking your calories, how much you shovel in, how much do you put out? Okay. How much exercise are you doing? Everyone has a specific amount of calories that they have to consume. Okay. Specific amount of food that you have to consume to do your daily duties for your cells to maintain themselves. Start exercising, now you need to go above and beyond that. Okay, so that's where those 2,000 calories a day come from. If for some reason you consume way too much ATP, I can't store it. So I've got to convert this into glycogen for long-term storage. Or what's the other long-term storage? Fat, adipose. If I start to produce an overabundance of ATP, this tells the cells to close up shop. This tells the cells to take away those receptors to say, I need more. No receptors, this triggers the body to start to transform those triglycerides, those free fatty acid chains floating around in your blood, and convert them into adipose, white, predominantly adipose. Excess glucose converted into adipose. Hell, even excess protein, shockingly, gets converted into adipose. Okay. So when we get into these states where we are very well fed, the receptors are gone. And it's those receptors that are telling the body, telling the cells what to do. And we go through a number of, as you can kind of see here, pathways. If we have excess glucose, again, I am not asking you to give me the steps for the conversion of glucose or glycogen into fat. Again, that's biochem, that's 400 level, okay? I am just here to show you that there is steps, there is process, okay? Where we can convert this into fat. 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde can be converted into glycerol. I can connect free fatty acid chains that are floating around in the blood to that glycerol molecule. And I can get it to be stored as fat. Again, it's all about receptors. It's all about enzymes. It's all about hormones, those communication things that we are doing in the body to tell cells what to do. So when we have free fatty acid chains floating around, guys and girls, we get a huge production of acetyl-CoA. Free fatty acid chains are generally around 16 to 18 carbons in length. I don't just take that whole sucker and be like, and consume it and make energy inside the cell. I cleave it. I take 2 carbons at a time and snip, 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 until I have 2 carbons left on that chain. And then I take that and get the hell out of here. I don't need you anymore. But every time I've sit there and snipped a couple carbons off of that chain, that hydrocarbon chain, of that free fatty acid chain, I take those and I make a copious amount of acetyl-CoA. And I just like using that word copious. Okay. But now I have this free fatty acid chain right here that I've cut off. And they boom, boom, okay, boom, comes in here, boom, comes in here. I have bypassed this entire aspect of glycolysis. As soon as this acetyl-CoA here, it enters into the citric acid cycle, right? That's what we talked about a little bit ago. And it starts the pathway. Oh, crap, here comes another one right behind it. Oh, okay, oxaloacetate, boom, go. Here comes another one right behind it. Can you see I have a ton of people knocking on the door to get into the citric acid cycle? And that can really bog the system down. Because what this is going to act with oxaloacetate. It can't react until that end product is formed in citric acid. So eventually I get this whole cuppeth, floweth, overeth of acetyl-CoA. The body, the cell, from a long-term standpoint, does not like the accumulation of acetyl-CoA sitting there, pooling up, if you will. It don't like that. So the cell's like, all right, I have an overabundance of acetyl-CoA in here and I'm not regenerating. Okay, so it's going to take this line of 100 people and it's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to convert the last 50 of you into something else. So all that acetyl-CoA coming in here is bypassing glycolysis, bypassing steps, bypassing time, allowing the system to regenerate properly. So it'll enter into citric acid or Krebs cycle, but eventually they pool up and the body doesn't like it. The body's like, okay, I'm going to convert you. I'm going to start converting you into ketone bodies. Acetone. Okay. That would be an example of a ketone. Okay. There are a couple other ones as well. I can get rid of those easily. I can exhale them out. Okay. I can pass some in the urine. That's how I can get rid of these fat-soluble things. I can also convert a copious amount of acetyl-CoA into fatty acids. I can take those fatty acids and I can combine them with glycerol. and I can make triglycerides. Again, this is all dependent upon hormones, enzymes, receptors. So if your diet is wholly based on consuming nothing but lipids, okay, you can see where you can have a huge accumulation of ketone bodies. The body can take those ketones and distribute them around, and we can start using those, or we can exhale them out. Okay, these ketone bodies can come back here into the citric acid cycle through a few fancy pathways. Fatty acids, I can use some of them. I mean, I can make phospholipids, okay? We've seen those, right, as the cell membrane, okay? So I can make some things with them. They're not all entirely evil. But I predominantly make, I make these fatty acid chains, and I combine them with the glycerol, and there's my triglyceride again. And that goes in your midsection. I can take that acetyl-CoA and I could make some stuff with it besides phospholipids. I can incorporate it into cholesterol, which is bile. Okay, that's only so much that I can do there. I can make some steroids from those cholesterols. Okay, sex hormones, vitamin D. I can make a little bit of that. But again, there's only a finite amount that I can do with this excessive amount. So where is the place that these things are primarily going to go to? Excess consumption of fat. Excess consumption of fat goes into your midsection. Love handles. Butt, thighs. Places you don't want it to go. Why is the consumption of fats? Because again, they provide several units of energy. I think I have. Yeah. For every 16 carbon fatty acid chain that you have, you're getting upwards of 108 ATP. That's a lot. Especially if it's a saturated fat. And if your diet's predominantly mostly saturated fat, you produce a lot of it. And you make these ketones. Awesome. Okay. But what happens if you're diabetic? You have a sugar imbalance. Well,
you need insulin.
Yeah.
To help with that.
You need a lot of help with that, right? Because what do we need? We need a little bit of carbohydrates to make some of those intermediates within the citric acid cycle. So if I'm not getting enough carbohydrates to regenerate oxaloacetate, basically, all those ketone bodies pool up within the blood. And for a diabetic, that's diabetic ketoacidosis, and then that's usually death. The utilization of fatty acids to help provide energy is perfectly fine. It's just that when your diet is predominantly fat, bad fats, no carbohydrates, or let's say, hell, excessive carbohydrates. Let's talk about the American diet. Excessive carbohydrate, excessive fat, excessive protein. All of that creates this huge pool of ATP. And if you're not running a marathon every single day to utilize all that damn ATP that you're creating from all that food in excess, those receptors go away. And we don't utilize all of those nutrients properly anymore. So we convert it to fat, that white adipose. Utilization of fatty acids, or breakdown, I guess I should say, of fatty acids, is called beta oxidation. Okay. And the only thing I really want you to know is that 2 carbons at a time are cut and removed from it. Okay. Whereas 1 glucose molecule can get you upwards of 32 ATP, 1 common typical fatty acid chain can provide 108 units of energy. Okay. So why is fat a legitimate source to make energy from? Because if you're going to go low intensity for a very long period of time, so let's say a intensity level of, you have a resting heart rate, or I'm sorry, a heart rate of around 100, 115, okay? And if you're walking for 30, 40, 50 minutes, that is going to be the primary fuel for your muscles, is all that fat around your midsection. Okay? To help sustain all those big, bulky muscles to walk for an extended period of time. Don't have a lot of fat stores, watch your diet really well, do that same exercise. Oh, okay, now you really start churning out those adipose stores, getting rid of them, utilizing the little stuff that you have there. And that helps to whittle down that waist, lose that body fat because of it. So this whole calories in, calories out is a pretty important phenomenon to understand. How much carbohydrates, how much it actually gets you, what a typical fatty acid chain provides. Okay, those are all important things to kind of understand, and to understand why you gain so much weight, because the receptors aren't there anymore. The hormones, the enzymes, they're different when you're in an overfed state or an underfed state. Okay? And we'll hint at some of these hormones actually when we start talking about digestion. I think this book talks about them in the nervous system, but we're going to move them to the digestion system. Okay? And this just tells you 2 carbons at a time are being cleaved, and that's what beta oxidation is. Again, I don't really have a picture at all. I'm not going to have you identify anything from a picture on this exam. Okay. On that quiz that you'll see later today popping up, you'll see the typical type of question that I like to ask from a multiple choice standpoint. Okay. And you may see them again on the exam, you never know. So all this excess acetyl-CoA, free fatty acid, boom, right into acetyl-CoA. Right into the citric acid cycle. If we have too much production of acetyl-CoA, citric acid bogs down, can't turn. Now I convert it into ketone bodies. I convert it into fat. There's stuff called brown fat as well. White fat is just long-term storage, the stuff that you hate. Okay, it's the stuff that I have around my midsection that I would rather not. But you do have brown fat. Okay, and the only thing I really want you to know about brown fat is that it is thermogenic. Okay, it is thermogenic. It provides heat. For a creature that can't control their body temperature, a newborn, they have a ton of brown fat. Eskimos have a ton of brown fat. If you're not an Eskimo, then you don't have a lot of brown fat. The only brown fat we really have is right here in the neck. Okay? It's right here in the neck. And I guess it's there to really keep the blood warm as it leaves the core, goes up into your head. Okay. But it is thermogenically active. So it provides heat and it burns calories. Okay. And it does it through, a few different things there. I'm not going to ask you. Okay. Brown fat is thermogenic. All right. Who has it? Newborns. Okay. After that first 8 months to a year, brown fat starts to kind of go away. Okay. Can you make brown fat? Yes, you can. It's called a bright adipocyte. I'll spell it. I'm not going to ask it on the exam, but that's bright, B-R-I-T-E. A bright adipocyte. That's a white adipose cell that has become thermogenically active. Okay. Training techniques, you can turn some of that white fat into that browning process, that browning fat. Okay. Where it's thermogenically active. It burns calories throughout the day. Okay. HIIT, Tabata training, those would be ways that you can help to convert white fat into brown fat. Does it happen after one time of doing a Tabata type training? No, it does not. God, I wish, right? These are things that happen over a long period of time. How long? Research is still kind of up in the air on that. Depends on a lot of different factors. Okay. So the vast majority of all this fat that we have on our body as adults is that white fat. Okay. Brown fat is thermogenically active primarily in newborns, again, because they can't control their temperature, their body temperature. Ketone bodies. Can build up in the blood. I just said that they are converted into the acetyl-CoA. They come from fatty acid chains. All right, chains underneath it. They come from fatty acid chains to acetyl-CoA and then to the ketone body. And again, if you have too much of these things, guys, it can be detrimental. It could change the pH of the blood significantly and cause damage. Right? So the only stuff that I have starred and underlined when it comes to lipids, that's what I would like you to know. It'll take me a day to get these notes up. I finally got the other days finally processed properly. All those will be up today. What about protein? What about protein? Your body needs nitrogen. Nitrogen is found on your amino acids. So I could take that nitrogen, cut it off of an amino acid, process called deamination, where I remove that nitrogen group. And now I can incorporate that nitrogen into structures within the body. Because remember, amino acids, proteins make things. Okay. We have our essential amino acids. Okay. We have our essential amino acids. I guess I could ask those. Private Tim Hill is the mnemonic to remember that. These are the ones that are essential because you have to essentially go out and find them in your diet. All right. So we have this wonderful pool of amino acids that I'm eating. I'm eating my chicken sandwich. Baked chicken, yum, yum, yum. Okay. I'm getting all that protein in. Okay. I'm consuming all of those essential amino acids. So I have this pool of amino acids that have entered into the system. Okay. I can use these amino acids to make anything and everything within the body. They make structures, they make things, white blood cells, okay, cellular components, structures, all that stuff. The great thing about these amino acids is that I can pluck it from one and add it to another, and I can take that carbon backbone and I can go and make something else. So there's deanimation, there's transanimation where I'm flip-flopping nitrogens and I'm flip-flopping parts and pieces. Okay. And I'm taking those amino acids and I'm making things, stuff that I need. The rest, go away. I don't need you anymore. Okay. Either it's gotten rid of, incorporated into urea, and you urinate it out. Okay. Or if for some crazy reason you eat a whole bag of beef jerky and you consume all that protein, you can convert it into the F word. Underline a couple things here because these would be the things that I probably ask as a multiple choice question on an exam or a quiz. Okay. And again, like I said, some amino acids are glucogenic, so they can become glucose. Okay. Some amino acids are ketogenic, they become ketones, which can then be converted into the F word. And this looks at that process of, taking a nitrogen group and removing it. Okay. And you can see this stuff can become a lot of different things. You can see glutamic acid, glutamate, plus oxalic acid, become alpha-ketoglutarate and aspartic acid now. So I'm constantly utilizing these amino acids to make a number of things where they can enter into the glycolysis pathway, where they can enter into the citric acid pathway, and they can be utilized to make ATP. Again, if you're shoveling in enough carbohydrates and fats, your body's using those. So all of this goes to make stuff. And if you're not going to use it, convert it, incorporate it into urea, those nitrogen molecules, incorporate it into urea, and get rid of it. I can't store nitrogen within any structure in the body. I can store nitrogen as urea in my bladder and then urinate it out. Okay, but it's urea, not nitrogen. So I make things. Okay, I consume a lot of protein. I form a lot of urea. So there's not a lot of accumulation of that nitrogen. There's not a lot of making of stuff if I'm urinating it all out. I convert it into ketones. I convert it into fat. I convert it into glucose. I convert it into fat. So excessive consumption of proteins is not a good thing. Even there's some cool research out even that looks at the timing of your protein intake. If you do equal amounts over all your meals throughout the day, that's best. Okay. If you eat maybe a couple ounces in the morning and then maybe 12 ounces at night, you only need about 6 ounces at a serving, at a sitting. So if you consume 14, 18, anything over 6, generally that's excess, especially if you're somebody who doesn't exercise. And it's just a waste. So there's some interesting research out there looking at even the timing of protein consumption and how much at that time that you consume. And that has a huge effect on metabolism and what you utilize and what ultimately can form energy and what can become fat. Okay, and this is what I just talked about there, okay? This is what I was talking about, okay? If more amino acids than needed is consumed, where is it? Nitrogen, amine group, nitrogen is excreted as urea, okay? Again, I have some amino acids that can be converted into glucose, and some amino acids that can be converted into ketones. They're called ketogenic. And we all know where excess ketones go. They go to the F word. When in doubt, excess goes to the F word. This is just showing you some of those amino acids that can enter into the cellular respiration, the glycolysis pathway. Okay. Here you can see some of these can be converted into pyruvate and go through the pathway. You can see some can become alpha-ketoglutarate, succinyl-CoA, succinyl acid, oxaloacetate, fumarate. You can see some are ketogenic right here and just enter into the pathway directly as a ketone would. Okay. I'm not going to ask you, is leucine ketogenic or glucogenic? I'm not going to ask that. Okay. Some amino acids can make glucose. Okay. Some amino acids can make ketones. And the body uses that glucose. It's called gluconeogenesis. Hell yeah. And if you haven't consumed enough carbohydrates, this is what the body does. It'll break down some structures and convert those amino acids into glucose. Break down structures, enters into the blood, gets shipped to the liver, enzymatic magic, comes back as glucose. And I can still get citric acid to continue a little bit. The breakdown of structures takes time. It's not right away. If you've ever watched those shows like Naked and Afraid, I mean, after a week and a half, they don't look so robust anymore. And after 3 weeks of living with nothing but a loincloth and a knife and not getting any food, you can see how much structure they've lost. They've lost a ton of weight. They've lost a lot of body mass. And that's going to help fund all of this making of energy. It's also based on hormones and enzymes, and we'll see some of that when we talk about the nervous system, the digestive tract, the endocrine system. Okay, we'll see some of those hormones that trigger the body into releasing enzymes to get triglycerides out of storage, glycogen out of storage. Okay, and actually, when you get into a starvation state, there are different enzymes involved, different brain chemistry going on, different enzymes get involved. It's fascinating. Fascinating, this body's ability to communicate with itself to tell it what to do and how to do it. I'm not going to ask anything. The brain loves glucose. Okay, it can use ketone bodies, but that's not its primary. It loves glucose. Skeletal muscles love anything for the most part, except lactic acid. The liver can utilize anything. As you can kind of see, the heart can utilize anything, but the heart never rests, so it can use anything and everything. Okay, do this. Okay, this is just kind of putting it all together. Again, I'm not asking you how do we interchange between protein within a skeletal muscle going to the liver. I mean, I'm not asking you to go backwards through the system at all. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. There's stuff highlighted there. Highlighted, highlighted, highlighted. I talked about this. Let me do this. Let me highlight a couple things here. Some words as you should know. Magenta. Lysis, again, to destroy. LIP is lipid. Breaking down that triglyceride into fatty acids and glycerol. That can enter tissue. Glycerol, the tissues can't handle it, goes to the liver. And as you can see, glycerol can be converted into glucose. And we make that into energy.
Hey, Dr. Thornley.
Yeah.
I have a question. I hope it comes out right. The way I don't know, I guess I'm thinking of.
Okay.
But with like the ketone bodies just doing, I guess, just affecting the pH of the bloodstream. Before when we talked about like glucagon with the pancreas and like insulin being inhibited, is that some type of, I know there's other factors, but like does that also help maintain homeostasis while the ketone process takes place?
That is only going to primarily work. I'm going to see if I can find another picture here for you guys. That is primarily only going to work if I have enough glucose, if I have enough glycogen stores. Okay. If I have the ability to get glycogen out of storage effectively, to be able to regenerate some of those intermediates within the citric acid cycle, then yes, it's going to help me process those ketones, and I'm going to be perfectly fine. Okay, like let's say you like to do you like to do the keto diet, the ketogenic diet. Okay, you're perfectly fine, right? You're a perfectly fine individual. You're not dying. You're not passing out and dying. You're not doing anything weird and crazy. All right. Because you get enough carbohydrates, or you have enough consumption of carbohydrates to be able to allow those ketone bodies to still enter the citric acid cycle and still provide units of energy. Okay. Let's say you're a diabetic and you don't have proper sugar balance. Now all of those ketone bodies are just going to sit there. They're going to pool up excessively. And then that's when the body's like, oh, poop. I can't do this. I can't handle this. I have to convert them into something else. Okay. So that's those getting converted into fat.
Right. I guess like I understand it. I guess my question is like, does the like other organ systems help out, like the pancreas, like we talked about before? Like as far as like the liver and the ketone body, like I understand that, but like does it compensate for like the lowering of the like pH in the blood? Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying. Is it something to where, I can't find the picture I want to show you. Ultimately, yes. If you alter the pH of the blood, then obviously now I'm changing the way that oxygen and CO2 can now bind to the red blood cell. Because now I'm starting to, if I get excessively acidic or alkaline, I'm starting to change the shape of the hemoglobin structure inside the red blood cell. So now that's going to make it a little bit easier or a little bit more difficult for it to bind with oxygen, get rid of oxygen, bind CO2, release CO2. So if you don't get enough oxygen in, what are you inherently going to do in your response as a whole? Are you going to keep moving and running around, or are you now going to stop, get tired, and
Stop. Yeah, you'll get tired and stop.
okay? So your cardiovascular system has now changed, right? So the cardiovascular system is limiting you from doing stuff because you're not getting enough oxygen. The body realizes that. It can increase, it can do a sympathetic effect and cause increase in rate and depth of breathing. But is that going to be something that's sustainable? No. So all these other systems are going to have a response. That's not necessarily going to cause the production of more glucose, getting glucose from your glycogen stores, or breaking down proteins per se and making them more glucogenic and making more glucose. So they're not directly affecting it, but indirectly affecting it. Oh, hell yeah. You're going to start to be more tired and lethargic because you're not getting enough oxygen in. Okay? You're going to get different hormones actually being released from the brain. Okay? So there's going to be a number of other systems that are involved. Yes. The only one that we really know of is the pancreas with insulin and glucagon, with carbohydrates. Okay. But yeah, all the other systems, there's going to be an adaptation that happens, and they're all going to have a response and do something. And that's going to indirectly affect your ability to perform and do all that stuff, which allows the body to catch back up, get rid of that oxygen debt, pump out the lactic acid, get your glycogen stores built back up, creatine phosphate stores built back up, all that nonsense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me do this.